Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which time you're watching this video. Let's begin another chapter of MacLeod's book on this asynchronous class. This now is chapter 8, a word about color. In chapter 5, we dealt with the expressionist potential of lines as anticipated by artists at the turn of the century. But of course, it was color which most captivated artists of that era. Throughout art history, color has been a powerful, even predominant concern of fine artists everywhere. Some, like George Seurat, devoted their lives to its study. Others, like Kandinsky, believed that colors could have profound physical and emotional effects on people. These yellow walls make me uncomfortable, Mary. Color can be a formidable ally for artists in any visual medium. Yet, in comics, the career of color has been, well, a bit spotty. There are many reasons for the stormy relationship between comics and color, but most can be summed up into two words: commerce and technology. Now, all aspects of comics history have been affected by commerce. Money has a tremendous effect on what is and isn't seen. But color in comics has always been unusually sensitive to the shifting tides of technology. The technology of color reproduction was first anticipated in 1861 when Scottish physicist Sir James Clerk Maxwell isolated what we now call the three additive primaries, which are red, blue, and green. These colors, roughly red, blue, and green, when projected together on a screen in various combinations, could reproduce every color in the visible spectrum. They were called additive because they literally added up to pure white light. 8 years later, French pianist Louis Ducos du Horon, whom I don't have a picture of, devised the idea of three subtractive primaries. These colors, cyan, magenta, and yellow, can also mix to produce any hue in the visible spectrum. But rather than adding light, these three do it by filtering it out. This subtractive effect was achieved through transparent substances such as cellophane, colored glass, watercolors, or printer's ink. Color comics heated the newspaper industry like an atomic bomb. Color boosted sales, but it also boosted costs. Measures were taken to streamline the process and make it more cost effective. And the standard 4-color process took over. This process restricted the intensity of the 3 primaries to 100%, 50%, and 20% using black ink for the line work. The look of these colors, held by bold, simply outlines and reproduced on cheap newsprint, eventually became the look of comics in America. So, while the expressive art of line was subjected to the subtractive filter of commerce on its way to comics, color was subjected to the filters of both commerce and technology. To counteract the dueling effects of newsprint and to stand out from the competition, costume heroes were clad in bright primary colors and fought in a bright primary world. The colors were picked for strength and contrasted strongly with one another, but on most pages no one color dominated. Without the emotional impact of single color saturation, the expressive potential of American color comics was often canceled out to an emotional gray. As always, there were some exceptions, but this was the overall trend. However, while comics colors were less than expressionistic, they were fixed with a new iconic power, because costume colors remained exactly the same, panel after panel. They came to symbolize characters in the mind of the reader. For instance, if we have the predominance of blue, white, blue, yellow, and gray on those proportions, the iconic power of comics, the idea fixed on the reader's mind, would be of Batman. On the other hand, if we had red plus green, and I disagree a little bit, but I do understand, because it would be it would be green plus purple, we would have Hulk. This basic scheme of colors were very fond to the Silver Age of superhero comic books. If you do pay attention to those, you will grasp the understanding that on Marvel comics particularly, the majority of villains from that era, or of that era, have a predominant green color attached to their uniform. There are only few examples of superheroes in Marvel Comics from the Silver Age, which is early 60s to mid 70s, that use green on their body or uniform. I can only recall the Incredible Hulk right now, and the Incredible Hulk has a dual aspect, because at some point, or sometimes, he can be a hero, and sometimes he can be a menace to other superheroes, to society. Depends on the writer, of course, and on the storyline, the plot in which he is being placed. Usually he is a force of good, but sometimes he is feared, and he is he has intense strength, so he can be feared, and sometimes he in order to defend himself, he poses to some people a threat. The American army would say so. This does not happen in DC Comics, since we have at least two major heroes who are solely based on green. There would be Green Lantern and Green Arrow. Moving on, many see the superhero as a form of modern mythology. If so, this aspect of color may play a part. Symbols are the stuff of which gods are made. Another property of flat colors is their tendency to emphasize the shape of objects, both animate and inanimate. As any child who has ever colored by numbers know instinctively. These colors objectify their subjects. We become more aware of the physical form of objects than in black and white. A game in motion becomes a ball in air. A face showing emotion becomes a head and two hands. The world takes on the childhood reality of the playground and recalls a time when shape preceded meaning. Oblong swinging sets, cylindrical jungle gyms, the wonder of things. Doesn't it follow then that the masters of flat color comics are, above all, masters of form and composition? Here we have an example with Jack Kirby from Marvel Comics. We have McKay and we have Cole. Three very nice examples of how these artists mastered the form and composition by the use of colors in their work. From Steve Ditko to Karl Barks to P. Craig Russell, that love of shapes persists in worlds fairly glowing with the mystery of first encounters. Any wonder, then, that comics in America has been so reluctant to grow up? In Europe, Hergé captured the magic of such flat colors with unprecedented subtlety. The Signora's Room, ravishing. Hergé created a kind of democracy of form in which no shape was less important than any other, a completely objective world. Comics printing was superior in Europe, and for Hergé, flat colors were a preference, not a necessity. But others, such as Clevelou, Casa, and Mobius, saw in their superior printing an opportunity to express themselves through a more intense subjective palette. Some of these work began reaching America in the 70s, inspiring many young artists to look beyond their four-color walls. Suddenly, it seemed possible for color to take a central role. Colors could express a dominant mood. Tones and modeling could add depth. Whole scenes could be virtually about color. Color as sensation, color as environment, color as color. Since the late 70s, more and more upscale color projects have begun appearing in America. Some publishers at the beginning tried applying the traditional four-color process to better paper with garish results. When modeling and more subtle hues were applied, though they seem out of space or out of place on the old shape-sensitive line drawings. Take that. The surface was changing, but not the core. For all their subtle hues, comics were still being written in primary colors. The new form required the creation of new idioms. Unfortunately, color is still an expensive option and has historically been in the hands of larger, more conservative publishers. This is beginning to change as I write this, but it's still the exception, not the rule. Comic artists wanting to conduct bold new experiments in comics art still have to learn, in most cases, to be bold in black and white. The differences between black and white and color comics are vast and profound, affecting every level of the reading experience. In black and white, the ideas behind the art are communicated more directly. Meaning transcends form. Art approaches languages. In flat colors, forms themselves take on more significance. The world becomes a playground of shapes and space. And through more expressive colors, comics can become an intoxicating environment of sensations that only color can give. The surface qualities of color will continue to attract readers more easily than black and white, and the story of color will no doubt continue to be intertwined with the forces of commerce and technology. We live in a world of colors, not just black and white. Color comics will always seem more real at first glance. But comics readers look for many things besides reality. And technology notwithstanding, color will never replace black and white entirely. One thing's for sure, though, when used well, color in comics can, like comics itself, amount to far more than the sum parts. And with that, we conclude chapter 8. Yes, it's a very short chapter, but we are going to talk a little bit more about colors on our synchronous class this Friday. So be prepared for that. Don't forget to watch this video on Wednesday, and I'll see you next class. Thank you so much. Bye bye.